The new executive of the Poker Players Alliance is John Pappas. As PPA Executive Director, he will be responsible for overall operations management, strategic initiatives, membership communication, and recruitment. Pappas has worked with the PPA since 2005 and was previously the Vice President of Government Affairs. We have Pappas on the line right now to talk about the PPA and their move to Washington, D.C. Congratulations on your new position. As Executive Director, what are your goals and aspirations for the PPA?
Well, thank you so much for the congratulations. I'm very excited to take on this responsibility and lead the more than 600,000 members of the Poker Players Alliance and hopefully lead us to victory. Our ultimate goal is to pass legislation that will clarify existing federal laws regarding poker and make it clear that Americans, law-abiding, consenting adults can and should be able to play poker on the Internet. We are fighting right now in Washington to pass one or two varying pieces of legislation, which I know Card Player magazine has discussed in length. That's the Barney Frank bill, which would essentially repeal the UIGEA, and then there's the bill by Congressman Wexler, which would create an exemption to the UIGEA specifically for poker and other skill games. That's our first and immediate goal. Our next goal is to have a better line of communication with our members and to motivate them more directly to engage with their members of Congress, with other elected officials, and to clearly make them advocates on our behalf. And I think we need to improve our communication with our members, and that's something I'm striving to do in the near term, and also to motivate our board of directors. We have a very stellar board of directors, and to get them more directly involved in our efforts on a day-to-day basis.
So as the new leader of the PPA, are you going to be making any significant changes?
Well, the most significant change is that we're going to be moving the organization, the operations of the organization here in Washington, D.C., and that's good for a couple reasons. First, many leading nonprofit advocacy organizations are based here in Washington, D.C., because they realize that you need to be here full-time to have a real true impact in Washington, and also really influence lawmakers where they work. But we also have the benefit of our 660,000 plus members back in the home states that can double up our efforts so that when members of Congress go home, they're also hearing from the PPA there. So the most significant change is going to be moving the operations here to Washington, D.C., and I think from that we will see a more focused, a more centralized, and a better organization.
So why do you think that poker players should join the PPA? Why is this so important?
Well, it's a freedom issue. If people believe in the freedom to enjoy the great game of poker on the Internet, and if they believe that the federal government has overstepped its bounds by this overreaching piece of legislation that goes beyond just poker, this is an Internet freedom issue as well. All of our efforts do not come without cost, and they can be significant. So we certainly could use your support to get our message out and to make sure that poker and other things on the Internet aren't fettered by an overreaching federal government.
Well, earlier you mentioned proposals by Senator Wexler and Frank. I wanted to know if you could give us an update on what's going on with that.
Sure. Back in early June, Mr. Frank had he was the chairman of the Financial Services Committee. He had a hearing on his bill, which was extremely enlightening and very good. And we believe that the next step for the Frank bill will be to have a markup, what they call a markup, in the full committee, which means that essentially the bill will be voted on and amended in committee and then sent to the House floor for a vote. Now, realistically, because of the short time frame, this going through the regular order is probably unlikely. So what we probably would see is perhaps a markup in committee, and then perhaps Mr. Frank's bill being attached to another piece of legislation that's moving through the Congress, most likely a spending bill, because there is significant tax revenue that can be derived from the Frank bill. It can be used in what they call, in congressional parlance, a pay-for other other spending priorities for the federal government. So that's kind of where we are with the Frank bill. The Wexler bill is kind of in a wait-and-see mode. It is. We expect, again, a hearing hopefully in September that will discuss the Frank bill and a couple other Internet gaming bills, perhaps in the Judiciary Committee. We don't have a commitment yet, but we are slowly but surely adding co-sponsors to, the Wexler bill. And as soon as we can reach a critical mass in terms of co-sponsors, I would imagine the committee then would act to hold a markup on that as well.
So how have these proposals been received by legislators in D.C. who have read them, learned about them, but aren't directly involved in the proposal? Are they looking at them positively?
It's hit or miss. I mean, we're going to have our opponents. There's clearly some members of Congress who are just opposed to anything that is perceived as pro-gaming, pro-gambling, and so we have our opponents, but we also have a lot of people who understand the necessity to appropriately license and regulate this industry. And that's what it really comes down to. And I try to boil it down when I meet with members of Congress and staff that this isn't a pro-gaming or an anti-gaming issue. This is a reality. Internet gaming is here and it's not going away. What is the most appropriate congressional response? And that is to license and regulate it. And I think people understand that. They're slowly coming around to it. Certainly we would have liked to have seen more co-sponsors to both the Wexler and the Frank bill. But, I think we have more support than we do co-sponsors, if that makes sense to you. Yeah,
that's great, too. So do you believe that changes in poker legislation will occur in the near future?
I do. I'm positive of that. I do believe that it's just a matter of when, not if. And, we certainly are trying to make sure something happens this year if we can. And
what do you think will be the first change that the public sees?
Well, I think the first change that we'll see is that there will be a system created, a regulatory system created in which websites would have to reach certain criteria to become eligible to offer Internet gaming services in the U.S. As the Frank bill outlines, some of those requirements would be that they would have to have a high degree in age verification technology, that they would have to provide services to problem gamblers, and that they would have to monitor for money laundering, fraud, abuse, and other things. So that's what we'll see, which, from a poker player's perspective, that's great for consumers. I think everyone would feel great knowing that we had a U.S. government-regulated industry that was operating rather than simply offshore companies who are doing the right thing, but we have that extra seal of approval when the U.S. government gets behind it.
Absolutely. Well, good luck with your good luck with your new base in Washington, D.C., and thanks so much.
Thanks, and I hope to hear from you guys again. We'll stay in touch.
This is Lizzie Harrison with John Pappas for CardPlayerTV.